Good morning. We look today at Matthew chapter 24. And Jesus is having this final conversation with his disciples. I mean, it's not just one conversation, but it stretches over, the last 2 or 3 days that Jesus is here on earth. And chapter 24 starts out with, as Jesus was coming out of the temple and was going away. Then his disciples turned around and they looked at the temple and they saw it in all of its magnificence and glory, and they commented on it. And they said, look at this beautiful building, and they pointed that out to him. And Jesus, you see all of this, don't you? He says, but I'm going to tell you this. There won't be one stone left of this building. It's all going to be destroyed. And then they went on their way, and they went up to the Mount of Olives, one of Jesus' places that he would seek out for time alone and time just with his disciples. This was not uncommon for him to go there. And while he was there, the disciples asked him, when's this going to happen? And listen to what Matthew writes here. He says, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus has told them about, his death, his resurrection, and he'd come again. And so Matthew, this is written, years after the resurrection and everything. It doesn't, written right away. So they've got, Matthew's got some experience, some post-resurrection experience when he writes this. But he writes, what are the signs of your coming and the end of the age? And so he's wondering, what are we going to look for, for you to come back again? What's going to, be that? And Jesus gives them some warnings. He talks about the necessity of being watchful, being faithful, being cautious, being careful. Because he says, beware that no one leads you astray, because he says, many are going to come in my name and they're going to say, I am the Messiah. And we've seen that happen. As you look back over history, there have been others that have come and led a lot of people away from Jesus, or maybe, I don't know if I should say completely away from Jesus, but they have started religions that don't include Jesus, and different ways that way. But Jesus says you're going to hear of wars and of rumors of wars, and all of these things are going to go on, but this isn't, when it's going to be. And these are the beginning of the birth pangs. They're going to, and then he says, because of your faith in me, because you are my followers, you're not going to have an easy life. You're going to be tortured. You're going to be put to death. But blessed are those who remain faithful. And I remember, when I was in grade school back in the early '60s, and the missile crisis and the bomb shelters, the fallout shelters that were made, and how we would practice not only the fire drills if there was a fire during school, but we would practice and we would be taught what we should do in case of a nuclear war, because it was going to happen and it was going to be the end of the world. And but it hasn't happened yet. So Jesus is saying, that when you hear of wars and rumors of wars and all of that, pay attention, but above all, remain firm in your faith and firm in your conviction that, Jesus is Lord and Savior. And that's what he's saying to the disciples and to you and me. And he says, that, he late in this chapter, he says, this generation will not pass away until all of these things happen. And so the disciples are imminently looking. The early disciples after Jesus' resurrection were watching any and every day for him to return again. And when he says, that, this generation will not pass away until these things happen, it makes it sound like the second coming of Jesus would happen, before the disciples died. Before these people, in the next 20 to 30 years. That was kind of, a generation of time. And still today, a generation is kind of in that same area that we count that way. But But Jesus just says that, in verse 30, he says, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the heavens, and all of the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. And those couple verses right there, make me think of Revelation. I mean, you remember back in December as we were reading through Revelation and thinking about it, talking about it, we had, the seven trumpets that sounded and different things that way, and the angels coming, and so Jesus is talking a little bit about that here, although we're going to, we hear a lot more about it in the Revelation according to John. And Jesus refers, in verse 15 of this chapter, he refers to the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament, and because Daniel had some of this end times apocalyptic material that he wrote in there too, but it's still that we need to just be waiting and be watchful, to be careful that we're not led astray, and just to remain firm in Jesus. And last night I was reading a book that a friend wrote, Bonnie Foss wrote, and thanks Deanne for loaning it to us. But in that book, I was going to bring it out here with me so I could read just exactly what she wrote. But she said that the way to be close to Jesus, to draw near to God, is to read the Bible, to get into the Bible. She said that we can know about Christ, we can know about being a Christian, we can know about Jesus, but in order that we know Jesus, we need to be steeped in his word. We need to read his word, and we need to study his word. We need to get to know him through the Gospels and through the New Testament writings of the early apostles, the early disciples. This is how we get to know our Lord Jesus and how we get to have this relationship with him. Because, I can know about a lot of things, but if I'm going to be a disciple of a lot of things, I need to study them. I need to gather information about them, and I need to involve myself in them. I need to let that become a part of me, and let me become a part of that. It's just, people can, I do woodworking. That. I'm in my wood shop right now. But there's a lot of difference between turning a saw on and running a board through it and creating something by using a variety of tools. And so to say that if I have a hammer and a saw, I'm a woodworker, is a pretty good stretch of the imagination. But when I've got a hammer and a saw and some routers and some different tools and different plans and different things, this is when you become a woodworker. This is when you become whatever it is. If you're going to be a farmer, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever it is, if you're going to be any good at it, you need to study it. As for a farmer, we are very aware of what farmers are. But, a farmer needs to be a mechanic. He needs to be a great businessman. He needs to study the new seeds and the fertilizers and the chemicals. And, there is so much involved in it that, I remember when I was, a kid again growing up back then, that, I had friends that said, well, I might go to college for a while, but if nothing else, I'll come home and farm. Coming home and farming it's not just a piece of cake. It isn't something that just, boom, anybody can do it at any point in time, because it takes a lot. And this is what Jesus is saying to his disciples and to you and to me. That we need to pay attention. We need to learn about Jesus. We need to involve ourselves in the life and the stories of Jesus by reading the Bible, by knowing what's going on in the Bible and with Jesus, so that we know Jesus, not just know about Jesus. So I went on a little more about that, but thanks, Bonnie, for stating that in your book, that, it's not enough just to know about, but what's important is to know to know Jesus, to know what's in the Bible. And it's one of the reasons that I spend some time every day in the Bible. It's one of the reasons that we need to spend a little bit of time every day in prayer, because when we spend time in prayer, we draw ourselves closer to God, and God draws closer to us as well in all of those things. And at the end of chapter 24, Jesus talks about, the wise and faithful servant who when the master comes home at, whatever time, it doesn't matter if it's morning, evening, 5 weeks from now or 2 years from now, but when the master comes home, the servant is doing what the servant is supposed to do. And this is what Jesus is reminding us of as well, that when he comes again, we who are faithful will be doing what Jesus would have us do. We would be worshiping him, we would be being faithful to him, we would be honoring God, and we would be honoring our neighbors. We would be living the life that Jesus would have us live. So we have stories of Jesus in the Bible, and by reading them, we get to know Jesus. And I hope that as we continue to read through the Bible, that we will all get to know Jesus better. May your day be richly blessed by your relationship with God.